Story 1. I had just moved into my first apartment alone. It was old, cheap, and had a ton of character-creaking floors, doors that didn't quite shut right, and wallpaper that was peeling in the corners. Honestly, it was perfect for a student like me on a tight budget. But the moment I unlocked the front door for the first time, I felt watched. It wasn't a person, not the neighbors, it was something else entirely. I tried to shrug it off. New place, new life, right? But it wasn't long before I discovered my new apartment had a secret, a room that shouldn't exist. At first, the signs were really subtle. I noticed a small, persistent draft in the corner of my living room. I checked everywhere, no windows, no vents, nothing that could explain it. So I traced it back to its source and found a faint outline in the wallpaper. A door. A door I definitely hadn't noticed during the initial walkthrough. It had no handle, no keyhole. Just this faint seam cutting into the floral pattern of the wall. Curiosity got the better of me. That night I walked over and pressed my hand against it. It was cold, I scolded. And then I heard it. A faint whisper, seeming to come from inside the wall. Help me. I jumped back so fast I nearly tripped. My heart was pounding in my chest. I told myself it was just the wind, the old building settling. But I knew it wasn't. Over the next few days, the strange occurrences became more frequent. I'd leave for class and come back to find things moved. A coffee mug shifted an inch to the left on the counter. A book on my nightstand, now slightly askew. Nothing drastic, just enough to make me question my own sanity. Shadows would flicker in my peripheral vision, always near that corner, near that wall. At night, I started hearing footsteps pacing behind the door. They were slow, deliberate, a constant back-and-forth rhythm that drove me crazy. I started sleeping with the lights on, but even that didn't help. The feeling of unease was constant. One night I just couldn't take it anymore. I decided I had to confront whatever this was. At exactly 2:14 a.m., I crept out of bed and pressed my ear against the cold seam in the wallpaper. The pacing stopped. It was dead silent for a moment, and then a voice whispered, so close, it felt like it was right in my ear. Please, don't forget me. The voice was soft, fragile. It sounded human, but there was something off about it, something hollow. I don't know why, but I whispered back, I won't. Who are you? For a long time, there was only silence. Then, I heard the pacing start again, faint, almost as if someone was walking in circles. The voice came again, barely a breath. I'm stuck. And you can see me. My blood ran cold. You can see me. What did that mean? Over the next week, the faint outline of the door became sharper, more defined. It was like the wall itself was changing. One evening, I was just sitting on the couch, trying to study, when I noticed the wall was slightly bowed outward. I stood up, my heart hammering, and walked over to it. I reached out a trembling hand and pressed. It gave way. It moved. Slowly, with a sound of grinding plaster and splintering wood, a door formed, opening inward into darkness. Inside was a small, cramped room. It was empty except for a thick layer of dust, cobwebs draping from the ceiling, a single cracked wooden chair, and a small weathered trunk in the corner. The temperature in my apartment plunged. My breath started fogging in front of my face. I swear I saw a shadow flit across the floor of the tiny room. And then I heard the voice again, clear as day, beckoning me. Sit. Sit with me. Against my better judgment, I stepped inside. The air was heavy and stale. Went straight for the trunk and lifted the lid. Inside were old belongings, yellowed books, a stack of letters tied with a ribbon, and a tattered, one-eyed doll. I picked up the letters. They described the life of a young girl who lived in this apartment decades ago. She was alone after her parents died, terrified of the neighbors, and spent all her time locked away, talking to no one. The letters detailed her growing isolation until she just vanished. The last letter ended mid-sentence. It read, I think someone is finally seeing me. I hope they... I dropped the letter. My hands were shaking so badly I couldn't hold it. That night I lay in bed, staring at the now-closed door to the hidden room. I could hear the footsteps again, pacing, pacing. But this time, there was a new sound, a faint scraping, like something being dragged across the floor. Then the whispers started. layered and urgent. Stay, stay. The temperature in my bedroom dropped even further. Frost began to form on the edges of my windows. It felt like all the air was being sucked out of the room. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't move. I was paralyzed with fear. And then, a small hand pressed against the wall right beside my bed. It was cold, soft, and unmistakably human. I screamed and scrambled out of bed, landing hard on the floor. In an instant, the cold vanished. The sound stopped. The room was silent. The next day, I found the building manager and, trying to sound casual, asked him about the apartment's history. He frowned, looking at me with concern. There was a tenant who disappeared decades ago, he said. A young woman. She had a difficult time. People in the building said she spoke to someone in the walls. But the apartment was renovated after she was gone. That wall was sealed up. No one should be able to open it. He stared at me, his expression serious. You need to be careful. Don't interact with whatever you think is there. Don't stay in the apartment alone if you can help it. I just laughed nervously and thanked him, but his words echoed in my head. That night was the night I almost didn't escape. I woke up to a scratching sound, running along the wall next to my bed. A whisper slithered from the corner of the room. I saw a shadow in the room begin to coalesce, a small, hunched figure, like a child, pale and gaunt. Long, dark hair covered its face. I didn't wait to see more. I bolted for my front door, but the hallway seemed to stretch, growing longer and longer. The lights in the corridor flickered and died. The cold was unbearable. I stumbled, felt the brush of something soft and freezing against my arm, and just ran. I didn't stop running until I burst out onto the street, gasping for air in the cool night. I never went back. I left everything behind. The apartment remained empty for months after I fled. I moved far away, to a different city, and never spoke of what happened to anyone. But sometimes, late at night, when I'm alone, I see shadows move in the corners of my bedroom. Sometimes, I feel a cold hand pressed gently against my arm. Sometimes, very faintly, I hear a whisper on the edge of hearing, "Don't forget me." And I know I never will. Some places aren't as empty as they seem. Some walls hold more than just pipes and wires and some presences. They just want someone to see them. So if you ever move into a new place and notice something off, a door that wasn't there before, or shadows moving where they shouldn't, don't investigate. Turn around and leave. Because some rooms, they never want you to go. Thanks for listening. If you have a story like this, share it in the comments, and be sure to subscribe for more. Stay safe out there. Second story. I don't set alarms anymore. I don't need to. Every night, no matter how exhausted I am, no matter where I sleep, I wake up at 3:11 a.m., and every night, at that exact moment, someone is standing just outside my door, not knocking, not speaking, just waiting. It started during one of the worst periods of my life. I had just gone through a really messy breakup, quit my job, and moved back into my childhood home to save money. The house had been empty for years, since my parents passed, and I hadn't spent a single night there since the funeral. The first week was surprisingly quiet, peaceful even. It felt good to be back in a familiar space. Then one night, I woke up suddenly. My heart was pounding, and I had no idea why. That feeling of waking up in a panic, you know? I grabbed my phone, squinting at the screen. 3:11 a.m., that's when I heard it. Breathing. It wasn't inside my room. It was right outside the door. Slow, steady, patient. It was the kind of breathing you hear when someone is deliberately trying to be quiet, but not quiet enough. I lay completely still, not even daring to breathe myself. The sound didn't change. It didn't get closer. It didn't fade. It just waited. I stared at my bedroom door, my eyes fixed on the thin strip of darkness beneath it. I watched for a shadow to pass, for any sign of movement. There was nothing. But I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone that someone was standing there. After a few minutes of agonizing silence, I whispered, "Hello." The breathing stopped instantly. The sudden quiet was almost worse. Then, after a long, stretched-out pause, it resumed, slower this time, heavier. That was the first night I slept with the lights on. The second night I tried to rationalize it. It was an old house. Pipes, drafts, whatever. I told myself it wouldn't happen again. As a precaution, I locked my bedroom door. I fell asleep eventually, but it was fitful. Then, like clockwork, my eyes snapped open. 3:11 a.m. on the dot, and there it was again, breathing. Only this time, it sounded closer. I heard something brush against the door. It wasn't a hand. It was something softer, like fabric. A sleeve, maybe? A coat? I stayed silent. I didn't want to engage. I just held my breath and listened. The breathing continued for exactly 1 minute. I timed it on my phone. Then, it just stopped. I waited for what felt like an hour before I finally got the courage to get up and check the hallway. It was completely empty. During the day, I tried to distract myself by cleaning out some of the old rooms. I figured being productive would help me feel less anxious. While sorting through a box in the attic, I found a stack of old photo albums. I sat down on the dusty floor and started flipping through them. Pictures of me as a kid, birthdays, holidays. Mostly I was standing in the hallway, grinning at the camera. But then I saw one photo that made me stop. It was different. In this one, I wasn't looking at the camera. I was looking past it, down the hallway, toward my bedroom door. And behind me, in the background, there was a shape. Tall. Too tall to be a person. It was blurred and out of focus, but it was unmistakably there. A dark figure, standing in the exact spot where I now heard the breathing every night. By the third night, I was genuinely terrified to sleep. I stayed up watching videos on my phone, anything to keep my mind occupied until my eyes were burning. I remember thinking, if I can just make it past 3:11, I'll be okay. But my body betrayed me. At 3:11 a.m., the phone slipped from my hand and clattered onto the floor. The sound began. Breathing. But this time, there was a whisper, so quiet I almost missed it. "I remember you." My chest tightened. The voice sounded familiar, not like someone I knew now, like someone who had known me a long, long time ago. After that night, it started changing. It was like it was learning my habits. If I fell asleep facing the door, the breathing would be right up against it, closer than ever. If I faced the wall, I'd hear slow footsteps pacing in the hall. Back and forth, never entering, never leaving. I stopped opening the door to check. I stopped calling out, because deep down I was starting to understand. The door wasn't what mattered. It wasn't a barrier. It was a focal point. On the 5th night, I couldn't take it anymore. The constant fear was exhausting. When the breathing started at 3:11, I sat up in bed and spoke. My voice was shaky but clear. "What do you want?" For a moment, there was only silence. Then a voice, clearer than before, whispered back. "To see if you remembered." I felt a cold dread wash over me. "Remember what?" I asked. There was another long pause, and it said, "How you used to let me in." And that's when the memory came back. Not all at once, just in fragments, flashes of being a child. Being lonely and afraid of the dark. I remembered talking to someone at night, through the closed bedroom door. Someone who promised they'd protect me. Someone who said they were always there, watching over me. I had been a little kid talking to an imaginary friend. I had given it permission to be there, all those years ago. The voice spoke again, pulling me from the memory. "You stopped opening the door." My throat felt tight and I could barely speak. "You grew up." The breathing deepened, sounding almost sad. But I didn't leave. That night, for the first time, I saw it. Shadow passed under the door. It didn't move like a person, stretched and warped, like ink bleeding into paper. The handle rattled once, gently, almost politely. "I waited," the voice said. "For years." The next morning, I packed a bag. I couldn't stay in that house another second. Called a friend and asked if I could stay with him across town. Said of course, and I practically ran out of there. That night, sleeping on his couch, I finally felt safe. I fell into a deep, exhausted sleep. Until 3:11 a.m. I woke up with a jolt. The sound was there, breathing. But it wasn't outside a door anymore. It was right beside me, in the same room. After that, there was no escape. I moved again. And again. I stayed in hotels, rented apartments in different cities. I tried everything. Different locks, different buildings, different states. Didn't matter, because wherever I went, wherever I slept, there was always a door. And every single night at 3:11, it It stood outside, waiting. The game was the same, but the location kept changing. It had attached itself to me. But last night, something was different. I braced myself as the time approached. 3:10, my heart hammered in my chest. 3:11, I waited, and there was nothing. No breathing, no footsteps, no whisper. Just absolute profound silence. I started to feel a sliver of hope. Maybe it was finally over. Maybe it had finally given up. Then, a knock. One soft, gentle knock on the door. And the voice said, "You don't need the door anymore. I'm recording this now because I don't know what happens next. I don't know what happens if I open it. I don't know how long I can keep refusing. But I know this. If you're a child and you're lonely and you talk to something in the dark and it listens, be careful what you promise. Because some things never, ever forget being invited in. So if you ever find yourself waking up at the same time every night with that feeling that you're being watched, don't answer. Don't open the door. And whatever you do, don't remember too much. Thanks for listening. Stay safe." Third story. I shouldn't have kept the photograph. That's the one thing I know for sure. I found it in a box of things that weren't mine, which should have been reason enough to just throw it away and forget about it. But I couldn't. The second my eyes landed on it, I felt this strange shift inside me. Like a memory was trying to bubble up to the surface, a memory that didn't belong to me at all. The photograph was old, a bit faded. It showed a man standing at the end of a long, dark hallway. He was tall, thin, and his form was slightly blurred, as if he'd moved just as the picture was taken. But his eyes. They were staring directly into the camera, directly at me. I moved into this apartment because of a sudden job relocation. It was supposed to be temporary, it was cheap, and it came fully furnished. Looking back, that should have been my first warning sign. The furniture was old, but weirdly clean. The walls were completely bare, no decorations, no nail holes, no personality. It was like someone had meticulously erased themselves from the space. While I was unpacking, I found the box shoved way in the back of the closet. There was no label on it, not even a layer of dust. Inside were more photographs, dozens of them. None of the places looked familiar, but one thing was constant. In every single picture, the same man was there. Always standing just behind whoever was taking the photo, lurking in the background. I spread the photos out on the floor. It was bizarre. They seemed to have been taken over decades. I could see the clothing styles change. The quality of the cameras evolved from grainy black and white to faded color prints. But two things never changed: the hallway and the man. In each successive photo, he was a little bit closer to the camera than he was in the one before. His gaze never wavered. He was always looking right at the lens. The very last photo of the stack, he was so close that his face was just a pale, distorted smear, completely out of focus. I let out a nervous laugh, trying to convince myself it was just some old, forgotten art project. A bit creepy, but nothing more. And that's when I heard the footsteps in the hallway outside my door. The hallway in my apartment building is narrow and carpeted. The footsteps I heard matched the space perfectly. They were slow, very measured. 1, 2. Then a pause. 1, 2. Another pause. It was the exact cadence of someone trying to walk without being noticed, carefully placing each foot. My heart started pounding. I pulled open my door, ready to confront whoever was out there. The hallway was completely empty, but the air felt wrong. It was stale and heavy, thick with this sense of expectation, like the world was holding its breath. It felt like the photograph had somehow seeped out of the paper and into the real world. That night, I gathered all the photos and put them back in the box. I didn't want to look at them anymore. I shoved the box back into the closet and tried to put it out of my mind. The next morning, though, the first thing I saw was the box. It was sitting on my kitchen table, open, and there was a new photograph lying right on top of the pile. My blood ran cold. It was a picture of my apartment hallway, the one right outside my door, and at the far end of it was the man. Closer than he had ever been before. I had to know who lived here before me. I started asking my neighbors. Their reactions were immediate and unnerving. One woman I spoke to literally crossed herself and hurried away. An older man who lived down the hall just shook his head slowly. "No one stays in that apartment for long," he said, his voice low. "Not after they start appearing." I asked him, appearing. What do you mean? He just looked at me with pity in his eyes and refused to say another word before closing his door. The fear I was feeling started to turn into a chilling certainty. Something was deeply wrong with this place. I needed proof. I needed to know if I was losing my mind. That night, I decided to run an experiment. I set up my phone on a little stand in the hallway, pointed it down the length of the corridor, and hit record. I left it there all night. In the morning, my hands were shaking as I scrolled through the footage. For hours, it was just an empty, silent hallway. But then, at exactly 2:44 a.m., the video feed glitched. The screen filled with static for a second, and then the image returned. There was movement. A tall, dark shape had appeared at the far end of the hall. It didn't walk. It didn't move like a person. It slid forward. Frame by stuttering frame, it glided closer and closer. It was a jerky, unnatural motion, until its face, that same pale, blurred face from the photo, filled the entire screen. And then the recording just stopped. I took the original photographs to the local library, desperate for answers. I spent hours digging through public records, historical archives, anything I could find, and I found it. The hallway from the old pictures didn't belong to my apartment building. It was from a local asylum. An asylum that had burned to the ground in the 1940s. I found old staff and patient records, and that's where the story got even stranger. The man appeared in dozens of photographs taken at the asylum over the years. Staff photos, pictures of the grounds, even candid shots of patients. But there were no records of him ever being admitted. No records of him being employed there. He wasn't a patient. He wasn't a doctor. He wasn't staff. It was simply present. It was in the background of the asylum's entire history until the night it burned down. After that, he vanished from all records until he reappeared in my apartment. That night, I was sitting on my couch, trying to process everything when I felt it. A sudden drop in temperature, and then I heard it. A sound right behind my head, breathing. It was a cold, dry, rattling sound, not human, a voice whispered, and the sound seemed to come from inside my own head. You kept me. I was frozen in place, too terrified to turn around. I was forgotten, the voice continued, a dry rustle of sound. Until you looked. The air in the room grew heavy, pressing down on me like a physical weight. I couldn't breathe. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. You see me, it whispered, right into my ear. And now I exist again. I had to get rid of him. The next day, in a panic, I tried to destroy the pictures. I tore them into tiny pieces, took the pieces outside and burned them until they were nothing but black ash. I thought that was the end of it. But when I got back to my apartment, they were there. On my bed, entire stack, perfectly restored, untouched. But there was one addition. A new photo. It was a picture of me, standing in the hallway, my face a mask of pure terror, and right behind me, so close his form was overlapping mine, was the man. But he didn't have a face anymore. It was just a smooth, blank oval of pale white. The most terrifying part is I don't think it wants to hurt me. It just wants to be seen, to be recorded, to be carried forward into the future. It told me not in words, but in a feeling, an understanding that bloomed in my mind that every time someone notices it, it becomes clearer, more solid, more real. And every time someone forgets or dismisses it, it begins to fade away. I asked it what happened to the other people, the other tenants who saw the photos. It didn't answer. There was just a profound, chilling silence that felt worse than any explanation. I ran, I packed a single bag, left everything else behind, and just got out of there. I didn't even tell the landlord I was leaving, but the photos followed me. I'd open my bag to get my wallet, and one would be sitting on top. I'd scroll through the photos on my phone and find new ones of him standing in places I'd just been. I started seeing him in reflections in shop windows, in puddles on the street. And every hallway I walked down felt longer, narrower, more familiar. As if I was walking right back into that first photograph. There was no escape. Last night I was jolted awake by a sound I now know all too well. The distinct click of a camera shutter. My eyes shot open. There was a photograph lying on my nightstand, right next to my head. It was a Polaroid still developing. The image slowly sharpened into focus. It was taken from directly above my bed. It was a picture of me, asleep, and standing over me, looking down. was the man. For the first time, he was perfectly clear. Every detail of his old-fashioned suit, the gaunt lines of his face, his dark, empty eyes. He was no longer a blur. He finally looked alive. I don't know how much time I have left. This is why I'm telling you this story, because I've learned how he works. Every time someone hears this story, every time someone pictures him in their mind, standing in that hallway, he becomes a little more real, a little more solid, feeds on being noticed. So if you ever find a photograph that feels wrong, a picture of someone who shouldn't be there, for God's sake, don't keep it. Don't look at it for too long. Whatever you do, don't let him notice you noticing him. Some ghosts haunt houses, some haunt people. This one, it only exists as long as it's remembered. And I really, really wish I had forgotten. Thanks for listening. Stay safe out there. Story 4. The bus stop that appears at night. I don't usually talk about this. Not because the memory isn't crystal clear, it is terrifyingly so, but because every time I bring it up, strange things start to happen. Small, unexplainable things. It's like all the clocks in my house stopping at the exact same minute. Or streetlights flickering out one by one as I walk underneath them. But the worst part? Sometimes when I'm driving late at night, I'll see it again in my rearview mirror. The bus stop that shouldn't exist. This all started back when I was working the night shift. 12 hours a night, 6 days a week. It was the kind of grueling schedule that messes with your perception of reality, making the world feel like a strange, fuzzy dream. I didn't have a car back then, so my only way home was the bus. Every single night, it was the same routine, the same route, the same stops, even the same tired faces of the other late-night travelers. I knew that route so well, I could have navigated it with my eyes closed. And that's precisely why I noticed, instantly, the moment something went wrong. It was one of those nights where the exhaustion hits you like a physical weight. It was about 1:40 in the morning, and the bus suddenly began to slow down in a section of road where it never ever stopped. I peeled my eyes away from my phone and looked out the window, and there it was, a bus stop. It looked completely real. It had a weathered wooden bench, a proper metal sign with the bus symbol, and a single dim overhead light that buzzed and flickered erratically. But I knew with absolute certainty that there was no bus stop on this stretch of road. I'd passed through here hundreds of times. It was just a dark patch bordered by a thick line of trees, nothing else. The bus doors hissed open. The silence was thick. Nobody got on. Nobody got off. After a few seconds that felt like an eternity, the doors hissed closed, and the bus pulled away, leaving the phantom stop behind. The rest of the ride home, I couldn't shake this deep, creeping sense of unease. The very next night, I was on high alert. As we approached that same stretch of road, my heart started pounding, and then there it was again. Same spot, same flickering, sickly yellow light. But this time, it wasn't empty. There was someone sitting on the bench, a woman. She was wearing clothes that looked old-fashioned. Not like a costume, just dated. Like a photograph from another decade had come to life. She sat perfectly still, not moving a muscle, not even turning her head as the massive bus pulled up. She just stared straight ahead into the darkness across the road. The doors opened again. She didn't get on. The doors closed. As we drove away, I twisted around in my seat to look back. The stop was still there, but the woman, she was gone. The bench was empty. The following night, my anxiety was through the roof. I decided I had to ask someone just to prove I wasn't losing my mind. As I got on the bus, I went up to the driver. "Hey," I started, trying to sound casual. "Quick question for you. Has there always been a stop back there? The one near the big patch of trees?" He looked at me in the rearview mirror, his brow furrowed in confusion. "There's no stop there," he said, his voice flat and final. I pressed on, my voice a little shaky now. "But I've seen it, twice. Last night there was even a woman waiting." He didn't laugh or call me crazy like I expected. His expression didn't change at all, just kept his eyes on the road and said in a low, serious tone, "If you see it again, don't get off." That was it. That was all he said for the rest of the trip. A week went by and nothing happened. The bus drove past that spot every night, and there was nothing but darkness and trees. I started to relax, telling myself the sleep deprivation had finally gotten to me, that I'd hallucinated the whole thing. And then, one night, just as I'd almost forgotten about it, the bus started to slow down again. My stomach plunged. The stop was there. The light was flickering, but this time there were 3 people waiting. A man in a crisp business suit, a teenage boy with headphones around his neck, an elderly woman leaning on a cane. They all stood perfectly still, like statues, facing the road. The bus doors hissed open, and then I heard it. A voice. It wasn't from outside. It came from right behind my seat, a soft, raspy whisper. "You can get off now." I whipped my head around so fast my neck cracked. The seat behind me was empty. The entire back of the bus was empty. The next night, it happened again. The bus slowed. The stop appeared. But the voice that whispered in my ear was different. It was softer, kinder, almost soothing. "You're tired," it said gently. "You've been working so hard." I looked out the window. The stop was there, bathed in its weak, flickering light. But this time, only one person was waiting. A little girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old, in a simple white dress. As I stared, she turned her head and looked directly at me, and she smiled. A small, knowing smile. The bus doors opened, and for the first time, I felt an overwhelming urge to stand up. A primal part of my brain was screaming at me not to move, but my legs felt like they had a mind of their own. I stood up and walked toward the open doors. The moment the sole of my shoe touched the cracked pavement of the bus stop, the world changed. The bus doors snapped shut behind me with a loud bang, and the bus immediately sped away, its red taillights vanishing into the night. I was left standing alone under the buzzing, flickering light. I turned and the road was gone. Not just dark, but completely gone, as if it had been erased. The line of trees that had been across the street was now right behind me, their branches forming a dense black wall. The air was heavy and still, completely silent. It felt ancient, like the air in a tomb. The little girl was gone. I was completely alone. And then, I heard the sound of crunching leaves behind me. Footsteps. They emerged from the darkness of the trees, slowly, silently. It was them. The man in the suit, the elderly woman, the teenage boy. Their faces were as pale as bone, and their eyes were hollow and empty. They formed a loose circle around me, keeping their distance, just watching. "You weren't supposed to get off," the man said. His voice was calm, devoid of any emotion. "You'll have to wait now," the old woman added, her voice like rustling paper. I asked them what they were talking about, my voice trembling. The teenage boy looked at me with an expression that almost looked like pity. "For your bus," he said simply. I have no idea how long I was there. Time didn't seem to exist in that place. It could have been minutes, or hours, or years. The light above never stopped flickering. The air never moved. There were no crickets, no wind, no sounds at all from the forest that surrounded us. Every so often, in the complete and total silence, the headlights of a bus would appear in the distance. It would drive past on a road that wasn't there, never slowing, never even acknowledging our existence. And each time a bus passed, one of the people waiting with me would simply vanish. Gone. A moment later, they would be replaced by someone new. A new figure would step out of the trees, looking dazed and confused. Someone who looked just like I did when I first arrived. Eventually, the man in the suit explained the rules. "This place," he said, "wasn't really a place at all. It was an in-between. A pocket of stillness for people who were tired, lonely, lost, people who, deep down, didn't want to keep going. If you choose to get off," he said, his eyes empty, "you wait." I had to ask. "For how long?" He gave me the faintest, saddest smile, "Till someone takes your place." I don't know how much time passed before she came back. The little girl. She stepped out of the woods and stood right in front of me. "You don't belong here," she said, her voice clear and small. I asked her why she was different from the others, why she could come and go. She looked down at her feet. I got off. But I remembered someone was waiting for me at home. She then lifted her arm and pointed a tiny finger into the suffocating darkness of the forest behind me. "That's the only way out," she whispered. "You have to remember." So I ran. I didn't look back. I just ran. The others, the man, the woman, the boy, they didn't try to stop me. They just watched me go. I plunged into the forest, and the darkness was absolute. Branches scraped my face and arms, but I kept running, fueled by pure terror, The trees felt like they went on forever. It was an endless, suffocating maze. But then, a pinprick of light. It grew bigger. It was a road. Headlights. I stumbled out of the woods and collapsed onto the cold asphalt, just as a bus screeched to a halt right in front of me. The driver, a different one, helped me up. He was shaken, asking if I was okay. I stammered, asking him where I was. He told me the name of the street. It was my stop. It was my regular stop. The one I always used. I quit that night job the very next day. I never took a bus again. But the story doesn't end there. Sometimes, when I have to drive late at night, I'll catch a glimpse of it in my rearview mirror. A flickering light on the side of the road where there shouldn't be one. A lone bus stop. And on the bench, I can see the faint silhouettes of people waiting. With one empty spot, waiting for the next tired soul. So if you're ever on a late night ride and you see a bus stop you've never seen before, if the door is open and you feel that strange pull, don't listen to the voice that tells you to rest. Don't you dare step off that bus, because some stops aren't destinations. They're waiting rooms. And once you're there, time doesn't move anymore. Thanks for listening. Stay safe out there. Story 5. My reflection started moving before I did. Everyone has had that feeling, right? It's the one where you stare at your reflection a little too long and suddenly feel uncomfortable. Like the person staring back isn't quite you. I used to laugh at that feeling, till one night when my reflection blinked before I did. I had just moved into this small studio apartment on the outskirts of the city. It was nothing fancy, just cheap rent in an old building. The kind of place you tell yourself is temporary. The bathroom was narrow, with a big, plain mirror bolted directly into the wall above the sink. It wasn't decorative, just practical. It was even slightly warped around the edges, like it had been replaced more than once. I didn't think much of it, not at first. The first strange thing happened while I was brushing my teeth. I leaned closer to the mirror to check something in my eye, and my reflection leaned in too. Perfectly normal. Then I straightened up. But my reflection didn't. It stayed leaning forward for half a second longer than it should have. I froze, my toothbrush still in my mouth. Then it moved, catching up to me, matching my posture perfectly. I let out a nervous laugh and told myself I was just tired. I didn't look in that mirror for the rest of the night. The next morning, curiosity got the better of me. Stood in front of the mirror, determined to prove myself wrong. I raised my right hand. A reflection raised its left. Correct. I waved. I stepped back. It stepped back. Everything was completely normal, until I smiled. My reflection smiled too, but it held the smile just a fraction of a second longer than I did. It was a tiny delay, almost unnoticeable. But it was long enough for me to see it and to feel a cold dread creep up my spine. After that, I became hyper-aware of mirrors. Not just the bathroom mirror, but my phone's screen when it was dark, the blackened TV when it was off, even the reflection in a shop window as I walked by. Sometimes, I'd catch my reflection looking slightly off. Its eyes would be focused just a little too intensely. It felt less like it was copying me and more like it was watching me, studying me. I started avoiding mirrors, only looking for as long as was absolutely necessary. Then came the night I'll never forget. I woke up around 2:30 a.m. with a strange, unsettling feeling. The room was silent. Too silent. I turned toward the bathroom, and my heart stopped. The bathroom light was on. I knew, without a doubt, that I hadn't left it on. I sat up slowly in my bed and stared toward the open bathroom door right at the mirror. My reflection was standing there, facing me. Even though I was sitting in bed, across the room and not in front of it at all, I didn't move. Neither did it. We just stared at each other from across the dark apartment. Then, very, very slowly, my reflection raised its hand and waved. I didn't. That's when pure panic set in. I yanked the blanket over my head like a little kid, my heart pounding against my ribs. After what felt like an eternity, I dared to look again. The bathroom light was off. The room was empty, but the mirror was fogged up. Written across the glass from the inside were two words. You noticed. After that night, things escalated quickly. My reflection began mimicking me imperfectly. It would blink a second too late, or it would turn its head at a slightly different angle. Sometimes it would smile at the most random, inappropriate times, But the scariest moments were when it wouldn't move at all. I'd be brushing my hair, and it would just stand there, motionless, its eyes locked on me. And sometimes it would mouth words. Silent words I couldn't hear but could clearly see forming on its lips. A few weeks later, while I was cleaning out the bathroom, I found something tucked behind the old medicine cabinet. It was a folded piece of paper, yellowed and brittle with age. My hands were shaking as I unfolded it. It was a note written in a frantic, messy scrawl. It said, "Don't watch it, learn. Don't let it practice. And whatever you do, don't turn your back on the mirror in the dark." A shiver went through me. I pulled up my lease history online. No tenant had ever stayed in this apartment for longer than 6 months. Then one evening it spoke. I was just standing there, frozen in front of the mirror, too scared to look away. Its mouth didn't move. What? But a voice came from everywhere and nowhere at once. A chilling whisper that filled my head. "You move so naturally," it said. "I'm almost ready." With my voice trembling, I whispered back, "Ready for what?" The reflection smiled, a slow, cold smile that wasn't mine. "To take your place." As it spoke, the surface of the mirror rippled slightly, like disturbed water. And at that exact moment, I felt cold, phantom fingers press against my back. From that night on, my reflection stopped copying me altogether. It moved independently, slowly, carefully. It was always studying me, observing my every gesture, my every expression. Sometimes it would step closer to the glass, its face almost touching the surface. Other times it would turn away from me completely and look towards something in the reflection that I could unsee. I started avoiding mirrors completely, covering them with towels, anything I could find. But reflections find you anyway. In puddles, in shiny surfaces, in the eyes of other people. One morning, the most terrifying thing yet happened. I woke up standing in front of the mirror. I had no memory of walking there. My reflection and I were perfectly aligned, like a perfect photograph. Too perfectly. And then it smiled. I didn't. Suddenly, the entire world lurched sideways. For a split second, I felt weightless, disconnected from my own body. Then I stumbled backward, falling out of the bathroom, my heart racing. I scrambled to my feet and looked back. My reflection was still standing there, and it looked disappointed. That night it explained everything. The disembodied voice returned, calm and patient. It said that reflections were meant to learn, to observe, and eventually to replace. It said most people never notice the subtle changes, the tiny delays. But once you do, once you see the lag, the process begins. It can't be stopped. Trembling, I asked, "And where do I go?" The reflection tilted its head, a gesture I recognized as my own. "Where you came from," it said. Into the reflection. I tried everything to stop it. I covered the mirror with a thick blanket, but when I took it off, the blanket was folded neatly on the floor. I tried cracking it with a hammer, but the crack would just vanish a moment later. I even tried smashing it to pieces. The glass shattered, but the next morning, the mirror was back. Perfect, clean, and waiting. I realized then that the mirror wasn't the doorway. I was. The connection wasn't to the object, it was to me. Last night, my reflection stood closer than ever before. So close that its breath fogged the glass from the inside. It looked at me with an expression that was almost pitying. "You're so tired," it said softly. "You can't keep fighting this. Just let go. Let me handle things from now on." I felt my entire body growing heavy, my movements becoming slow and unresponsive. And for just a moment, I swear I felt myself slip, like I was falling backward into a cold, dark pool. If you're hearing this story, then I managed to hold on. For now. But I don't know for how much longer. Sometimes, when I catch a glimpse of myself in a window, my reflection looks relieved, patient, like it's just waiting for that one moment when I finally let my guard down, when I finally blink just a little too slowly. So please, take this as a warning. If you ever notice your reflection lag behind you, if it smiles when you don't, if it ever feels like it's watching you instead of just copying you, stop looking. Turn away. Because some reflections aren't just echoes of who we are. They're replacements. They are very, very patient. Thanks for listening. Story 6. Everyone in my town stops talking at 2:17 a.m. Every town has its quirks, right? It's a strange tradition, an old local legend, maybe a road that people avoid for no clear reason. But the town I grew up in, we had something worse. Much worse. Every single night at exactly 2:17 a.m., the entire town falls silent. And I don't just mean it gets quiet. I mean it becomes utterly, completely silent. The kind of silence that feels heavy, like a physical weight. And if you're unlucky enough to be caught outside when it happens, well, something notices you. I grew up in one of those tiny, forgettable towns you just pass through on your way to somewhere more important. We had one main road, one small grocery store, and a single gas station that always closed way too early. As kids, we were taught a set of rules that never really made sense to anyone from the outside. Rule 1, be home before dark. Rule 2, always lock your doors. And the most important unspoken rule of all, never ever speak after 2:17 a.m. No one ever explained why. It wasn't something our parents joked about or our teachers mentioned in class. Even the local police treated it like an undeniable law of nature. You could feel the tension build every night. At 2:16, everyone would glance at a clock, a watch, their phone. Then, at 2:17, everything just stopped. The first time I truly noticed the depth of it, I was 16. I was up late, doing typical teenager stuff, watching TV, texting friends, probably procrastinating on homework. At Laundanschlafen, my phone buzzed. It was a single text from my mom, who I thought was fast asleep in the room next door. All it said was, "Quiet now." I remember frowning, confused. And then the clock on the cable box clicked over. It's 2:17 a.m. Instantly, the TV didn't just flicker, it shut off completely. The entire house settled into this profound, unnatural stillness. Even the constant low hum of the refrigerator died. Without even realizing it, I was holding my breath. I strained my ears, listening for anything. But outside, there was nothing. Not the chirp of a single cricket. Not the rustle of wind in the trees. Not the distant rumble of a car on the highway. It was like the entire world had been put on pause. I didn't learn the truth about why until years later, until the night I broke the rule. It happened when I was 23. I had moved away for a few years, gone to college, and experienced city life with all its constant noise and energy. I'd almost forgotten about our town's strange ritual. Almost that night, I was visiting my parents and was driving home from the local bar. The streets were completely empty, the old streetlights casting these faint, hazy glows through the fog. I was feeling a little nostalgic, a little brave. I glanced at the clock on my car's dashboard. Stupid. A small, stupid laugh escaped my lips. Still doing this, huh? I muttered to myself. And that's when the car radio cut out. The engine died, coasting to a stop, and the dashboard clock changed. 2:17. I stepped out of the car. It was a bad idea. I know that now. The silence was immediate and suffocating, pressing in on me from all sides. It felt thick, almost like water. I tried to laugh it off to break the tension. "Hello?" I called out. The sound of my own voice felt fundamentally wrong in that void. It was too loud, too sharp. It echoed once, unnaturally. And then, something echoed back. But it wasn't my voice. It was a distorted, twisted imitation of it. From somewhere further down the dark street, I heard it. Footsteps. They were slow, deliberate, unhurried. They didn't sound human. Step was heavy, as if it was testing the ground beneath it, learning the texture of the asphalt. And in that terrifying moment, I finally understood why no one ever talked about this. Why the rule was never explained. Because once you understand what's out there listening, it begins to understand you too. I scrambled behind my car, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I was sure it was making a sound. The footsteps stopped. The streetlights above me flickered violently. And there, standing under one of them, was a shape. It was tall. Too tall. Its form was all wrong. Shifting and uncertain, as if it couldn't quite decide how many limbs it should have. Its head tilted slowly to one side, listening, focusing, and then it spoke. Not with a voice, not out loud. The words bloomed inside my skull, cold and clear. "You are loud." I learned later, after I somehow survived that night, what 2:17 really is. It's not just when the town goes quiet. It's when they arrive. They don't come from the sky or from beneath the ground. They come from somewhere adjacent, a place, a dimension where sound is a beacon, where sound attracts attention. And in that place, attention means you've been selected. I ran harder than I ever have in my life. Every footstep felt deafening in the silence, a screaming announcement of my location, even though my own ears couldn't hear them. The thing behind me moved without any sense of urgency. It didn't need to rush. It knew the rules of the game. It knew the town would stay perfectly silent for its hunt. And it knew that I, with my city noise still clinging to me, no longer belonged. I started trying doors, desperate for shelter. I banged on the door of the first house I reached, then the next, and the next. All of them were locked. Every single one. I pounded silently, my throat raw from screams that made no sound. Through one of the windows, I saw the family inside. They were wide awake, just sitting there, staring straight ahead, not moving, not even blinking. They saw me. They were completely ignoring me. They weren't being cruel. They were surviving. They were following the rule. The air grew colder, and a sharp pressure started to build behind my eyes. The thing was closer now. I could feel its attention on me like cold fingers brushing against the back of my neck. "You remember noise?" It whispered again, right inside my head. "I remember you." The pressure became unbearable. I felt my knees give out, and I collapsed onto the cold pavement. And then a hand grabbed my arm. It was my mother. She yanked me to my feet and pulled me inside her house, slamming the heavy wooden door shut behind us. For just a fraction of a second, the sound of the door broke the silence. And from the street, I heard a noise like a wave of pure disappointment roll through the empty space. And then nothing. Absolute silence once more. She didn't speak. Not a word. Not until the clock in the hall chimed, signaling it was 2:18. Then, she let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for years and hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. She told me everything. That decades ago, something had arrived in our town, something that learned that sound was how it found people. It learned that absolute silence starved it, but only temporarily. So every night it returns to hunt, and every so often, someone forgets the rule. The missing persons reports in my town never mention 2:17 a.m. They'll say someone moved away without a word, that they got lost hiking in the woods, that they just packed up and left town. But everyone who lives here knows the truth. If someone talks, if they sing, if they drop a plate, if they scream between 2:17 and 2:18, they're just gone by morning. In the town, and the silence grows a little bit deeper. I'm writing all of this down because I'm leaving this town tomorrow. And this time, I'm never coming back. But for tonight, I'm awake. I'm watching the clock on my phone. It's 2:16. The silence is coming for me one last time, and I swear. I can already hear footsteps outside. So if you ever find yourself passing through a town where everything seems to stop at the exact same time every night, don't ask why. Don't get curious and don't test it. Whatever you do, keep an eye on the clock. Because when the world finally goes quiet, it's listening for you. Thanks for watching. Stay safe out there. Story 7. I keep waking up at 3:03 a.m. Something is standing in my doorway. There's a specific moment in the night when the world just feels wrong. Not quiet, not dark, just unfinished. For me, that moment is 3:03 in the morning. I don't set an alarm. I don't need one. Every single night, my eyes open on their own, and every single night, something is standing in my doorway. The first time it happened, I just assumed it was a bad dream. I woke up suddenly, my heart pounding, my throat completely dry. My room was barely lit by the streetlight coming in through the window, casting these long, twisted shadows across the floor. And that's when I saw it, a shape in the doorway. Tall, perfectly unnervingly still. I couldn't make out any features. It was just a darker shape against the darkness of the hallway behind it. I whispered, "Hello?" It didn't move. It didn't react at all. After a long, tense moment, I blinked, just for a second, and it was gone. I snatched my phone from the nightstand. The screen lit up my face. 3:03 a.m. I let out this nervous little laugh, trying to brush it off. It had to be stress, exhaustion, a trick of the mind, anything but what it felt like. But the next night, it happened again, the same time, the same place. This time, though, the shape was clearer. It wasn't just a shadow. It was a figure, shaped like a person, that seemed to absorb the light around it. It was like a hole in the fabric of my room, a spot where light just died. It didn't belong here. Now, the strangest part of all this? I could move. I wasn't frozen like in all those sleep paralysis stories you hear about. I could sit up. I could breathe. I could speak if I wanted to. But every single instinct in my body was screaming at me not to. The thing in the doorway felt attentive, like it was waiting, watching for me to do something wrong, to make a mistake. So I stayed still, watching it watch me. On the third night, it changed things. It leaned forward, just a little, and that's when I noticed its head was tilted, as if it was listening, really concentrating on something. I swallowed hard, the sound echoing in the silence. "Can I help you?" I whispered. The words felt dangerous the second they left my mouth. The figure immediately straightened up. And then, slowly, it took a step closer. It didn't walk like a person. There were no footsteps, no creak of the floorboards. Instead, the air in the room shifted. Felt like the pressure changing right before a big storm rolls in. My ears even popped. The entire room felt smaller, more claustrophobic. I pulled the blanket up to my chest without ever taking my eyes off it. And then, just like before, it vanished. One moment it was there, the next, just an empty doorway. I started keeping a log. I had to find a pattern, something to make sense of it. And the pattern was terrifyingly simple. Every night, wake up at 3:03 a.m. See the figure in the doorway? Experience absolute silence. But the variable was its position. Each night, it got closer. The first few nights, it was in the doorway. Then it was just inside the room. The next night, it was standing beside my dresser. It never touched anything. It never made a sound. It just stood there, watching. One night, things took an even stranger turn.
Don't.
I didn't wake up to it being there. Instead, I had a dream. I dreamed I was standing in my own doorway, looking into my bedroom. I could see myself fast asleep in my bed. But I wasn't alone. Standing right behind me in the dream was the figure, waiting. I woke up with a scream stuck in my throat. My eyes shot to the clock, 3:03 a.m., and the doorway was empty. I couldn't handle it alone anymore. I told my friend about it. At first he laughed it off, told me I was just having nightmares, but that changed when I told him the time. His smile completely faded. "Don't joke about that," he said, his voice serious. When I asked him why, he just changed the subject, refusing to talk about it. But the next day, he sent me a message. A simple question that made my blood run cold. It said, "Does it move closer every night?" He came over later that day and he brought something strange with him. It was an old, clunky voice recorder. He told me his grandmother used to talk about something she called the Watcher of the Threshold, a being that appears when people are caught in that space between being awake and being asleep. Something that comes to measure you, to see if you're ready. Ready for what, I asked? He just shook his head. He didn't have an answer. That night, I left the recorder on my nightstand, the little red light glowing. I forced myself to stay awake, watching the minutes tick by on my phone. 3:02 a.m. Nothing. The room was normal. Then the clock ticked over to 3:03. Instantly, the atmosphere changed. The air felt heavier. I didn't turn my head to look at the doorway. I didn't need to. I knew it was there. And as I lay there, motionless, the voice recorder on my nightstand began to hiss with static. In the morning, the first thing we did was listen to the recording. At first, it was just the hiss of static I'd heard the night before. But then, underneath it, we heard breathing. It wasn't mine. It was slow, impossibly controlled. And then, a voice. It wasn't spoken aloud, not in the room, but the recorder had somehow captured it. Single chilling phrase whispered through the static. Too aware. After that night, its behavior changed. It stopped appearing right at 3:03. Some nights it would wait, letting me panic. Letting me scan the dark doorway over and over, my heart pounding. And then, just when I'd start to relax, it would step out from the corner of my vision, closer than it had ever been before. Night I woke up and it was standing at the foot of my bed. I could see the distinct shape of shoulders, a head, but still no face, just a void. And then came the night it spoke to me, not with sound, but with understanding. The thoughts weren't mine, but they were in my head, clear as day. You wake easily. You notice patterns. You don't turn away. Trembling, I thought back, asking what it wanted. The head tilted again, that same curious gesture. And the answer came. To see if you will stay. My dreams got worse. Much worse. I started having nightmares of being trapped in rooms with no doors. Dreams where I was standing perfectly still, like a statue, while something else was using my body, walking around in my life. I'd watch my own life continue, without me in it. I started sleeping with all the lights on, hoping it would make a difference. It didn't. The light didn't stop it. It didn't even seem to care. One night, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. The screen lit up, 3:02 a.m. It was a message from my friend. If it reaches the bed, don't let it see your eyes. I didn't even have time to reply. The room changed. The air went cold, the doorway darkened, and I felt a presence lean over me. I could feel it just inches from my face, a presence that was cold, dry, and ancient. I squeezed my eyes shut, my heart hammering against my ribs like it was trying to break free. And then it whispered, shh, not in my head this time, but a real whisper, so soft I almost missed it. Almost ready. It's been 3 weeks since that night. It hasn't crossed the invisible line of the bed. Not yet. But every single night, I wake up at 3:03 a.m. And every single night, it stands a little bit closer, waiting. Waiting for the moment I finally look. The moment I open my eyes. So if you ever start waking up at the same time every night, if you get that feeling of being watched before you even see anything, if you find something standing in your doorway that doesn't move, don't stare at it. Don't speak to it. And whatever you do, just don't let it decide you're ready. Because once it does, you won't wake up anymore. Thanks for listening. Story 8. The last house on my street still has lights on. There's a house at the end of my street, the last one. The one everyone pretends is empty. No cars ever sit in its driveway. No trash cans appear on the curb on Tuesdays. The mailbox is just a black box with no name on it. It's the house no one lives in. At least that's what everyone says. But every single night, without fail, a light turns on inside. I moved into this neighborhood for the quiet. It's one of those places with tree-lined streets and houses that all look vaguely the same. It's the kind of place where you assume nothing ever happens. My new neighbors were friendly enough, but in a distant way. They'd smile politely, give a little wave, but never linger for a real conversation. On my first night, I was still unpacking boxes when I saw a glow through my window, a warm yellow light slicing through the dark. It was coming from the house at the end of the street. I figured someone else was moving in, just like me. It was a simple assumption, and it was a mistake. I quickly realized the lights weren't random. They followed a strict, unexplainable pattern. The living room light would turn on precisely at sunset. An hour later, the kitchen light would join it. Then, at exactly 10:13 p.m., the kitchen would go dark and a single light upstairs, in what looked like a bedroom, would turn on. Then, at 2:44 in the morning, every light in the house would shut off at the exact same moment. A perfect, silent synchronization every single night. It was bizarre. A few days later, I was grabbing my mail and saw my neighbor Mark doing the same. I decided to ask, "Hey, the house at the end of the street," I said, trying to sound casual. "Do you know who lives there?" Mark froze for a second, his hand hovering over his mailbox. Then he laughed a little too loudly. "No one," he said. "That place has been empty for years." I pointed toward the house. But the lights, he cut me off before I could finish. "Oh, they're on a timer," he said quickly. I nodded, but I saw it. His hands were shaking. About a week after I moved in, I heard something new. It was 2:43 in the morning. I had my window open for the cool night air. And through the silence, I heard a sound, single distinct sound drifting from down the street. It was a door closing. It's not slamming shut, but closing softly, carefully, as if someone was trying not to wake anyone up. 1 minute later, at 2:44, all the lights in the house went out. That was the last night I left my curtains open. Even without looking, I knew when the lights were on. It's hard to explain, but there was a pressure in the air, a feeling of focused attention. Felt as if the house wasn't just illuminated, it was watching. I'd be taking out the trash at night, and a sudden, powerful urge would hit me to look down the street. I never did. Some deep-seated instinct told me not to. Then came the package. I found it on my porch one afternoon, a A simple cardboard box with no return address, no postage stamps, nothing, just my name, handwritten on the top. I took it inside. Inside, there was only one thing. A single, old-fashioned house key. It was heavy, made of dark, tarnished brass, and attached to it was a small paper tag that read, "End of street," the next morning. I went to check my mail, and there was a note inside, handwritten on a piece of folded paper. It said, "If you've received the key, it's already too late to ignore it. Do not enter before sunset. Do not enter after 10:13 p.m., and whatever you hear, don't answer." There was no signature. My heart was pounding. I had to know what was going on. I found Mark washing his car and confronted him. I showed him the key. The color drained from his face. He looked around nervously, then whispered, "You need to get rid of that now." I asked him why. He just stared at the house at the end of the street, then looked back at me, his eyes wide with fear. "Because," he said, his voice barely audible, "it means the house knows you're here." That night I was a wreck. I just sat in my living room, watching the clock. At exactly 10:13 p.m., I saw the upstairs light in the house at the end of the street flickered on. And at that exact moment, someone knocked on my front door. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. I froze. The knocking came again, just as slow. Then a voice. It was soft, polite, and sounded impossibly close. "I know you have my key." I couldn't move. The words from the note echoed in my head. "Whatever you hear, don't answer." I stayed completely silent, holding my breath. I heard a sigh from the other side of the door, sound of genuine disappointment. "Tomorrow then," the voice said, and I heard the faint sound of footsteps walking away. I didn't sleep a wink that night. The next day, Mark saw me outside, looking exhausted. He finally broke. He told me everything. Years ago, a nice, quiet family had lived in that house. Then strange things started happening. Lights flicking on by themselves, doors opening in the middle of the night. Neighbors started hearing voices calling their names from the empty yard. One day, the family just vanished. The house stayed, and every few years it gets lonely. It picks someone new. That evening, another note was on my porch. "Come by before sunset. Bring the key. We should talk." Every instinct in my body screamed at me not to go, but I had to know, so I went. I walked to the end of the street. The key slid into the lock and turned without a sound. The door swung open easily. Inside, the house was immaculate. Perfectly clean, perfectly arranged. There was no dust on the furniture, no clutter on the tables. It looked like a museum exhibit. But every single clock in the house, the one on the wall, the one on the mantle, was stopped. All at 2:44. "Thank you for coming," a voice said, the same polite voice from my door. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "You've been very observant." My mouth was dry. I managed to ask what it wanted. The lights in the room flickered gently. "Caretaker," the voice replied. It explained what a caretaker does. The house needs someone to turn on the lights, someone to lock the doors, someone to make sure the routine is followed, someone to make the house feel lived in so people don't ask questions, the voice added. Then it showed me. Not with words, but with images that flooded my mind. I saw my neighbors, one by one, standing right where I was standing now. Mark, the woman across the street. All of them had been chosen at some point. Most refused the key, and they moved away soon after. Some, the voice hinted, simply disappeared. But there was always one who eventually accepted. They stayed, till the house got tired of them. Suddenly, I heard a sound from upstairs. The slow, dragging creak of footsteps on the floorboards above me. "Your predecessor?" the voice explained calmly. "He stayed too long." A smell drifted down the stairs, the scent of dust and something old, something forgotten. That was it. I ran for the door, fumbling with the knob. It wouldn't turn. It was locked solid. The lights in the room dimmed. "You already accepted the key." The voice reminded me, its tone still gentle, almost chiding. That was consent. I stood there, trapped. "You can leave," it said, after a long silence. "But someone must replace you. The house cannot be empty." The front door clicked and swung open. Through the doorway I could see the street. I saw Mark walking his dog, laughing at something on his phone. He looked happy, unaware, unprotected. I stood in that doorway for a long time, caught between the street and the house, listening to the quiet, expectant breathing of the walls around me. The lights flickered, waiting for my decision. I don't remember what choice I made. I just know that now. I live at the end of the street. I'm the one who makes sure the lights turn on every night. I'm the one who closes the door at 2:43. And sometimes I see a new family moving into the neighborhood. They always look so happy. So, if you ever move to a quiet street and notice a house that no one seems to live in, but its lights still turn on every night, don't ask questions about it. Don't accept any strange packages left on your porch. And whatever you do, don't take the key. And because empty houses are always looking for someone to fill them. Story 9. I answered a phone call that was never there. There was no vibration in my hand, no sound on the table beside me, no familiar alert that makes you instinctively look down. The screen simply turned on. Bright. Sudden. Intentional. The words on the screen glowed. Incoming call. Unknown. I stared at it longer than I should have. Something about the timing felt off. Not frightening, just strange. Like noticing a clock change numbers when you weren't even watching it. I told myself it was just a glitch, a weird bug. Then against my better judgment, I answered. It was a perfectly normal night. There was no storm raging outside, no power outage, no unsettling mood hanging in the air, just the quiet comfort of routine. I'd finished work late and was spending the evening doing nothing important, mindlessly scrolling through my phone, half listening to a show I'd already seen a dozen times. My apartment is small, but familiar. I know every creak of the floorboards, every distant noise from the building. The refrigerator hummed its soft, constant tune. Cars passed outside at irregular intervals. Somewhere upstairs, I could hear someone shift in their sleep. Nothing felt wrong. That's why the silence, when it arrived, stood out so much. It wasn't sudden. It crept in gently, like someone was slowly turning down the volume on the world. And then, in that profound stillness, my phone lit up. I put the phone to my ear. Hello? There was a pause. Not the awkward delay you get with bad reception, but more like someone was choosing their words carefully. I was hoping you'd notice. A calm voice finally replied. It was a man's voice, neutral, neither friendly nor threatening. Just there. Who is this? I asked, my own voice a little tight. Another pause. That's not the important part, he said. What matters is that you answered. I frowned, confused. Answered what? The opportunity, he replied, his tone unchanging. I pulled the phone away from my ear for a second and checked the screen. The call timer was running, ticking up the seconds. But when I quickly opened my recent call history, there was nothing. No incoming call, no outgoing call. No missed notifications, just an empty list, as if this conversation wasn't happening at all. That's strange, I muttered to myself. Right from the phone, the voice said gently, yes, it usually is. A faint sense of unease started to crawl up my spine. It wasn't quite fear, more like a mix of curiosity and extreme caution. How did you know I'd answer? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. You didn't hesitate, he replied immediately. That tells me enough. About what? I pressed. About how you pay attention, he said. Most people don't. That felt uncomfortably personal, he continued. You've been alone tonight. Not lonely, just unoccupied. I sat up straighter on my couch, my heart starting to beat a little faster. How do you know that? He didn't answer my question directly. Instead, he said, you notice quiet moments. That's why the call was able to reach you. As he spoke, I became aware of something else. Faint sound underneath his words. It wasn't static or interference. It was an echo. A subtle reverberation, like he was speaking from a large, empty space, somewhere enclosed but vast. Where are you calling from? I asked, my eyes scanning my own small apartment. Nearby, he said, but the way he said it, I knew he wasn't talking about physical distance. He meant relevance. I decided to just ask. Why did you call me? He answered without hesitation. To keep something balanced. That doesn't explain much, I shot back, a hint of frustration in my voice. It's not supposed to, he said. You don't need the details, just awareness. I glanced around my apartment again. Everything looked exactly the same. The half-empty glass of water on the coffee table, the remote control, the stack of mail. But the silence felt heavier now, like the whole room was holding its breath. "You're doing fine," the voice added, as if sensing my growing tension. "Just keep talking." It was only then that I realized how truly quiet it had become. The refrigerator wasn't humming anymore. The sound of traffic outside had completely faded away. Even the distant, familiar noises from the rest of the building were gone. It wasn't eerie, like a power cut. It was unnatural. "There's no sound here," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I know," he replied. "That's why the call came through." Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed something at the end of the short hallway leading to my bedroom. It wasn't a figure, not even a distinct shape. It was just a difference in the darkness, a patch of shadow that didn't belong to anything that shouldn't have been there. I blinked hard, but it didn't disappear, just stayed, a subtle distortion in the corner of my vision. "I think I'm seeing something," I said quietly into the phone. The voice on the line remained perfectly calm. "Try not to focus on it," he advised. "Tension makes things clearer." That was the last thing I wanted. I felt a sudden, powerful urge to end the call, to throw my phone across the room. "Should I hang up?" I asked. "No," he said, his voice firm for the first time. "Not yet." "Why?" "Because conversations create distance," he explained. "Silence closes it." That did absolutely nothing to comfort me. "What happens if the call ends?" I asked, my throat dry. There was another one of those careful pauses. "Things become more curious," he replied. He must have known I needed more because he finally explained in the simplest terms he could. "There are moments," he said, "when boundaries thin, not between places, but between attention and awareness. When we are truly unoccupied, our minds quiet, those boundaries become permeable. Sometimes something on the other side notices that quiet and tries to understand the boundary. Talking," he explained, "keeps its attention occupied elsewhere." "You're not in danger," he assured me, though my racing heart disagreed. "You're just useful right now." As he spoke, my phone vibrated in my hand. A real physical vibration this time. I looked at the screen. Another incoming call. Also marked unknown. The screen was split, my current call was still active, and this new one was waiting. "That one isn't for you," the voice on the line said quickly, urgently. "What happens if I answer it?" I asked, my thumb hovering over the green button. "It continues," he said. The second call rang for a long time, much longer than a normal call ever would. Each silent phantom ring seemed to stretch for an eternity. I just stared at the screen, my mind a blank slate of panic and indecision. The first caller said nothing more. He just waited with me. Then, as suddenly as it began, the second call stopped on its own. The screen went back to showing just the single, active call. At the same moment, the faint, unnatural shadow in my hallway softened. It didn't vanish, but it seemed to recede, to fade back into the normal darkness of the apartment. And just like that, the silence lifted. The world came rushing back in. The refrigerator started its familiar hum. A car drove past my window. The apartment was normal again. "You did well," the voice on the phone said, his tone back to its neutral calm. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice still shaky. "I wait," he replied, "till someone else notices," and then the line disconnected. No beep, no click, just absence. The next morning I checked my phone with a feeling of dread. In my call history, there was a single entry. One missed call. Time-stamped at 3:12 a.m. There was no number attached, no voicemail left, just a small label underneath it, something I'd never seen before. It read, "Missed connection." Nothing dramatic happened after that night. There were no nightmares, no strange visitors, no more unexplained events. But something inside me had shifted. I became more aware of the quiet moments, of the pauses in conversation, screens lighting up without a sound. And every so often, late at night when the world is still, I'll notice my phone screen turn on by itself. It's just for a second. Then it goes dark. I don't know who I spoke to that night or what I was a part of. I don't know what would have happened if I'd answered that second call. I do know that some connections don't need a sound to be made. Some conversations don't leave any records, and some calls you learn aren't meant to be ignored or rushed. Thanks for listening. If you enjoy stories that explore the strange and unseen, be sure to subscribe for more. Stay safe out there. Story 10. Every night at 3:17, someone knocks. The first time it happened, I was sure I was dreaming. It was exactly 3:17 a.m. I remember the time because the red glow of my digital clock was the first thing I saw when the sound pulled me from sleep. 3 slow knocks. They weren't loud or urgent, just deliberate, measured, as if whoever was knocking already knew I was awake and was just waiting. I'd moved into the house only a month before. It was old, but well-maintained, sitting at the edge of a quiet neighborhood where most folks had lived for decades. It was the kind of place where nothing ever seemed to happen. The house had belonged to my aunt, who passed away the year before. There were no tragic circumstances, no strange rumors attached to her or the property. It was just an old house. But even so, from the very first night, I felt it. That undeniable sense that the space around me was already occupied. It wasn't a hostile feeling, not exactly. Just present. Like sharing a room with someone you can't see. The next night it happened again. 3:17 a.m. On the dot. 3 knocks. The same rhythm, the same steady pace. I sat bolt upright in bed, my heart pounding against my ribs as I stared at my bedroom door. But the sound wasn't coming from there. It was coming from downstairs, from the front door. I didn't open it. My instincts screamed at me not to. Instead, I crept down the cold wooden stairs, my steps barely making a sound, and peered through the peephole. The porch was empty. The single streetlight outside cast long, flickering shadows, but there was no one there. No movement, no sound of footsteps walking away. Nothing. I pulled my phone from my pocket to check the time again. 3:18 a.m., whatever had been there was gone. It happened every single night after that. Always at 3:17, always 3 knocks. Never louder, never softer.
Oh.
The consistency was what started to get to me. It was maddening. I began sleeping with my bedroom light on. When that didn't help, I left the hallway light on too. Soon, every light in the house was blazing all night long, but the knocks didn't stop. They just kept coming, a nightly appointment I couldn't cancel. I started noticing other things too. Small disturbances that I might have dismissed otherwise. Cabinet door in the kitchen left slightly ajar. A dining chair moved just a few inches from where I'd left it. The air in certain rooms would feel heavy and thick after midnight, charged with a strange energy, and always like clockwork at exactly 3:17. The knocking would begin. I needed proof. I had to know if I was losing my mind. One night, I set up my phone on a small table in the entryway, aimed at the front door, and started recording. I went upstairs and waited, watching the time on my phone tick toward the inevitable. At 3:17 a.m., I heard it. The 3 distinct knocks. The next morning, I checked the recording. The audio was crystal clear. It picked up the knocks perfectly. But the video showed something I wasn't prepared for. Just as the knock sounded, the doorknob began to turn, slowly, just a few degrees, from the inside. Later that day, I saw my neighbor, an elderly man named Mr. Henderson, tending his garden. I tried to sound casual. I asked him if he ever noticed anyone coming around the house late at night. He looked at me, first with confusion, then with a deep, unsettling unease. He lowered his voice. "Does it knock?" he asked. My stomach plunged. He told me the house had been vacant for years before my aunt ever moved in. People would try to live there, but no one ever stayed long because of the knocking. That night, I tore through the boxes of my aunt's belongings that I still hadn't unpacked. At the bottom of a heavy wooden drawer, I found what I was looking for, a small leather-bound notebook. I flipped it open. Every page was filled with her familiar handwriting, dates going back years. Next to each date, a single repeated time, 3:17 a.m. On the very last page, scrawled in a shaky hand, were 5 words: "If it knocks, do not answer." And underneath, a chilling addition: "It only wants to be acknowledged." So I stopped. I stopped going downstairs. I stopped checking the door. Stopped reacting at all. When the knocks came at 3:17, I just lay in my bed, eyes squeezed shut, pretending to be asleep. The knocking from the front door continued for a few nights. But then something changed. I started hearing it from inside the house. From the walls of the hallway. From the ceiling above my bed. From behind doors that were already wide open. Always 3 knocks. Always patient. Then one night, right after the knocking faded, I heard a voice. It was soft, a whisper that seemed to come from right outside my bedroom door. "I know you're awake," it said. The voice wasn't angry. It sounded lonely. It was the loneliest sound I had ever heard. I went back to the notebook, frantically searching for more answers. The later entries explained more than I ever wanted to know. My aunt had learned the truth from the previous owner's family. The house wasn't haunted by a person. Not really. It was something older. Something that lived in routine, in patterns. Something that marked time. The time 317 wasn't random. It was the exact time of day the final nail was driven into the house when it was first built. It's a moment when something was sealed inside. It didn't want entry. It was already in. It wanted recognition, acknowledgement. It just needed proof that someone inside the house could hear it. Because once it was acknowledged, it could be invited further in. I lasted almost 3 more months. It's 3 months of nightly terror, of a house that was shrinking around me. Then one night I broke. I was exhausted, terrified, and just so angry. As the knocking echoed from the closet door, I whispered into the darkness, "Please stop." The knocking stopped instantly. The silence that followed was 1,000 times worse than the noise. It was thick, heavy, and full of anticipation. Then came a new sound, a single, soft knock on my bedroom door. From the inside, the handle began to turn, not aggressively, not with force. It moved slowly, delicately, as if someone was testing it, asking permission. I waited a long time, the voice whispered, now from just the other side of the door. I found the passage in my aunt's notebook later. She had spoken to it once, just like I did. She had acknowledged it. And from that night on, the knocking moved closer. First inside the house, then inside her room. Then she wrote inside her head, "Never slept a full night again." There were rules. She had written them down. Never answer it. Never speak to it during the knocking. Never open any door at 317. And never ever acknowledge it directly. I'd just broken the most important rule. After that night, the knocks changed. They weren't always 3 anymore. Sometimes 2. Sometimes 4. Sometimes they sounded right beside my ear, a sharp rap on my headboard. The house began to feel smaller, the rooms tighter, as if the very walls were listening, pressing in on me. "It knocks to measure you," is what my aunt wrote. It measures your fear, your attention, your awareness. Each time you react, you become clearer to it. Each response makes it stronger. On my last night in the house, I packed everything I owned into my car. I planned to be gone long before midnight, but I was so tired. I sat down on the couch just for a moment and accidentally fell asleep. I woke with a jolt. At 3:17 a.m., the knocking came, but this time, it was everywhere at once. The doors, the walls, the floor beneath my feet, the ceiling above my head, the whole house vibrated with it, and then complete silence. A voice whispered right in my ear, "You heard me." I ran. I didn't grab my last bag. I didn't lock the door. I just ran to my car and drove away. I moved out for good that morning and never returned. I heard the house was sold again. And then again and again. Sometimes even now, no matter where I live, at exactly 3:17 in the morning, I wake up. And I hear 3 soft knocks. They're not at my door anymore. They're in my mind. And I know it followed me, not because I invited it in, but because I answered just once. So, if you ever hear knocking late at night and you know deep down that no one is there, don't answer. Don't even acknowledge it. Some things don't need to come inside your home. They just need to know you're listening. Thanks for watching.